Hey, 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 what's up, Crown Nation? Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Rock the Crown. We're in our spiritual elements today. And so we want to introduce you to uncovering the crown, the spirituality of the crown. Today we have our special guest, Shahida Sharif. And don't forget, we have all of our queens, Nefertari and Nafisa and myself here to have this serious, and much needed conversation about women and spirituality. Sit back, relax, and get ready to take notes. All right. I'm hoping
about to get it cranked up now.
Okay,
in
now
a spiritual way.
Spirituality is all about getting to the top, to the top, to the top. So thank you so much, Shahida, for being our special guest.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you for having me, you all. I love it. Alhamdulillah.
So the spirituality, we've had this conversation. I know Shahida and I have had it. I've had it with Nafisa, Nefertari, Daia, just so many different people. And what actually spirituality is, and when women or men always say, well, I'm spiritual, I'm not religious, right? And what really does that mean? So first, we want to kick this conversation off talking about what is the difference between spirituality and religiosity. And this is a term I know Shahida had spoken about this earlier today. And she was like, you mean, I was like, spirituality and religion. She was like, religiosity. And she just kept moving, and I was like, oh, yeah, that's what she meant. So the difference is, of course, spirituality and religion are often used interchangeably between the two concepts, but they are totally different, right? That spirituality involves a personal quest for meaning in life, while religion involves an organized entity with rituals and practicing focusing on the higher power, or as we would say as Muslims, Allah, as Christians would say God, and the Abrahamic faith, they also use the word God. And then, of course, other people have different senses of a higher power. But we are specifically speaking today about Islam. So from the Islamic faith of us as Muslims. So again, the difference between spirituality and really religiosity. Anybody else want to kind of add to that note?
Yeah, so with spirituality, really we can look at that more as a personal kind of touch for a person where they're really trying to get in tune with themselves, just to kind of align themselves with God and their relationship. So not just with themselves and other people, but, kind of putting God, when you think about that triangle, God first and then family and business and everything else after that. And then from a religious point of view, it's more so like the rituals and the practices of the religion kind of tied in too. So I kind of look at that from that perspective.
I'm muted. Okay, I would like to ask Miss Shahida, you spoke about Naima, you spoke about you all's conversation in religion and religiosity. Like, can you let us know about that distinction?
Well, it's a term that is more so been used in this contemporary society, right? Where things that have been established in an organized way within religion has been taken to an extreme right, so to speak, where people become a little bit more fanatic. I don't want to say extreme, but in some cases where they take religion to the point of like it's out of its context or out of its nature. And so what has started to happen is you see people going away from religion, right? Because of this quote unquote religiosity, this extremism within religion that has created these fringes or factions and these groups where people feel in order for me to hold fast to my beliefs, I have to come across as this fanatic, right? Where in actuality, when you come to the middle, which is the path of Islam, come to the middle path, you don't have to be an extremist because our belief system is is incorporated within our spirituality, within the organized manner in which we do things. And really, when you think about religion, you're having this conversation about boundaries, right? What are the things that is within my moral and ethical code, those principles that I'm grounded in? And so oftentimes when you hear this debate between spirituality and religion, even though they're interconnected, as she said, and they're linked, it's really one where one becomes devoid of the other, is that you start to see this pull between these opposite poles, right? Where the only way we can coexist is if you believe as I believe, right? Or you have to let go of your beliefs in order to be with me. So it's really coming to that middle ground where we're not just letting go of that moral code, or just saying, I don't need anything, right? I can be
Right.
everything and anything, but really coming back to that middle ground.
I think something important that you said, I wanted to, when people say, I can be anything, right? I think that what has kind of happened also in this society is that people have kind of gotten really, really comfortable with, these terms, you only live once. I want to do it for me. I want to do, it's my way or no way. You know what I'm saying? What is the one thing that people say often? Basically, like, people feel like, because they feel like they're so self-aware, which they're not, but because people feel like they're so self-aware that they can just do anything, say anything, and be anything that they want to, with no really regard, and they think of that as spiritual, instead of really focusing on religion then guiding them through their spirituality. What do y'all think about that conversation, and how people are perceiving, like, just like, hey, I can do whatever I want to, and God knows my heart. I hear that a lot.
And it's a really interesting place that we are in history. It's not necessarily something new. It's just new for us in that it's becoming more prevalent, right? Whereas before it may have been, people say, oh, you're just a hippie, or, you're in the freedom movement. But it's looked at this spiritual freedom, or this liberation as freedom, right? But it's like liberation from what? Freedom from what exactly? And it's really, when we go back to it, is when religion has been presented in a way that has been colonized, that has been patriarchal, that has removed the balance between the masculine and the feminine, and really understanding in essence who God is, and we try to put God in human form, it has taken us so far away from actually being able to believe in what God actually intended for us to believe, right? So, of course, when we see this rejection in society, it's a natural rejection because the spirit and the soul rejects that which doesn't resonate with it. So, what we see these people searching for is truth, right? So and everybody says, I'm a truth seeker. I just want truth, or I take a little bit from here and there. And it's really that they're trying to find what makes sense. And when they really start to study those truth principles within Al-Islam or within whatever their faith may be, they do come back to some order. They do come back to a sense of religion. So I think, what we're hearing is people seeking, searching, because you naturally say la before you say illallah, right? So you have to reject those things that have been presented to you before you can fully submit.
I like that. Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking about spirituality and how, a lot of times when people kind of go through things mentally, and a lot of times they say, if you're like faith and fear don't work together, or certain things, like if you were at a certain point or level, then maybe, you won't go as deep with certain issues. But, when we think about mental health and all the different types of disorders, like anxiety, mood disorders or eating disorders, impulse, like just different things that, how would you say spirituality has an impact on helping people get through things like this in their life?
So a part of what you were saying was a little muffled. I don't know if it was the sound on my end, but what I gauge from what you're saying, and I feel the spirit of it, is that like how does it ground you mentally, right? When we think about the benefits of spirituality, which is present in most religions, there's a sense of grounding because you're connected to a higher being, right? You're connected to a higher purpose. And when you're able to be rooted and grounded, you can feel a sense of security, right? Because a lot of times, what is at the crux of those things is insecurities, anxieties, a lot of those expressions of dis-ease or discomforts within our soul, right? When your soul is unsettled because it's not anchored or connected to a higher purpose, then you do experience that unrest, right? And so when you are grounded spiritually, it gives you that well, right, to refill from, that you can tap into when you're depleted, right? And so you have a little bit more of a filter, right? You have more self-control, you have, just a better sense of self, and you're able to manage through crises. And not to say, oh, you could just bounce back from trauma, you're resilient or anything like that. No, there's a process, right? But you have to tap into it. So I definitely believe that when you're anchored spiritually, you hear so many people, and I don't want to be controversial, right? Because we don't want to replace what science and medicine has given us to help balance chemical imbalances, right? But having in addition to that, I should say, and having in addition to that, that level of consciousness and awareness that I'm anchored in something, or I can have, a talk with my therapist who is also a spiritual counselor, right? That can guide me through whatever challenges I'm having. And so, while some people may say just pray on it, yes, you do pray. And in addition to that, if you're in a serious crisis, you also get additional help. So yes, there is, I would say there's a recipe within spirituality that gives you relief, right? That there's medicine in being spiritual. So if you have a spiritual practice, whether it's prayer or meditation or fasting or, whatever that practice is, it's good to be consistent with it, because I've actually seen personally where someone is out of their mental state, out of their mind, and they can't say anything else but they could call on God. They couldn't speak, they couldn't respond to anyone, but everything that came out of their mouth was a remembrance of God, because they had that practice before they lost their mind. So it was just very interesting to witness that in real time, that was all their soul allowed for them to utter.
Wow, as I listened to you, really what it kind of took my mind to is where we're on our way to now. We're getting ready to go into Ramadan. And a lot of times we find ourselves being more grounded spiritually, and there's a lot of things that we kind of push out, like earlier when you mentioned lie, no, it's first, and then bringing those other things in. And so just being able to kind of seek that balance even throughout other times, having that spirituality, that's what took my mind to as you were speaking.
And something else I wanted to ask a question. They say that spirituality, people can be spiritual without being actually connected to a religion. And I think that this sometimes is a concept where people feel like they don't have to find religion. Can you kind of talk about that a little bit in terms of like when people are finding themselves struggling, like, I don't want to identify with a religion, I'm okay with maintaining my spirituality.
And it's just really, coming to understanding of what that means to that person and what it's rooted in, right? Because you can have, quote unquote, a sense of spirituality that's rooted in devil worship, right? But you feel you gain this sense of power and confidence because you speak with, other beings that can, manipulate and facilitate things to happen for you. So there are people who delve into dark practices and they equate that to spirituality. So we just have to be very conscious and aware of, okay, if I'm moving into a quote unquote lighted path or guided path, what is my practice or spirituality rooted in? What are those principles? If it's, I'm just going to be good to every human being I encounter, or, I'm going to give charity, it's coming from somewhere, right? And so what we've come to see is that it's okay. We just have a bunch of good people, right? And so that's great to be a good person. But what really helps us to be excellent, right? And to strive further than just that, yes, we want to be good, of course, but there's a level of excellence that we can strive to because we're refining our spirit, we're refining our soul, we're refining this form that we've been placed in, right? So we know we are physical beings with a spiritual essence, and we're not here on this earth and in this realm for nothing, right? And so, yes, we can be good people. Yes, we can have our practices, whatever that may be. And I don't want to name anything specifically because I'm sure we have many people watching. And what I do want to be clear about is that when we talk about it Islamically, it's like you're establishing a contract with God, right? When we talk about the term aqidah is the belief system that we have as Muslims, and that aqid, or coming from that term, is what connects us, right? It's a contract. And so when I say there's no God but God and Muhammad is his messenger, I'm entering into a contract. And so we enter into contracts daily, right? Business contracts, legal contracts. When we sign on to Facebook, that's a contract, right? All these things were, well, I know we have a legal contractor on it. So think about our spiritual contracts that we are entering. And when we say we're practicing something spiritually, what are we really connecting ourselves to? What are we really contracting ourselves with? And we know once we sign our names on the dotted line, that's business, that's serious business, right? So when we talk about spirituality, we're talking about the state of our soul. What are we really anchoring our soul to? What are we entering into a contract with? And what are the like there's always something you're accountable to, right? Or there are terms and conditions for our contracts, right? And there's a limited time, right? So you might have 90 days, you might have 50 years. Who knows what your contract may, the terms may be, but the reality is it's there and it's real. And so while we may be trying to figure it out, as we're on this journey, the spiritual journey, it's good to deal in actual truths, right? And a lot of times people say, well, what is truth, right? Of course, we can have philosophical debates all day long. But when you start seeing the truths that align throughout human history, right, throughout the evolution of man and where we are in that continuum to today, what really is truth is you'll see those things that have stood the test of time, right? And those practices that are not rooted in anything are no longer in existence. But the ones that are growing and still growing are here.
Yeah, that was a mouthful. I love it.
Don't get that.
I think next we want to talk about the impact of spirituality on mental health. We kind of just want to kind of graze over this a little bit, specifically because we know that this is an issue within our community, all communities really, when people who have maybe some mental health issues and people are just like, do this, go read Surat al-Kahf or go do these things. And they expect for people to do those specific things, and that all of the issues that that person has is just supposed to melt away magically because they read the Quran or that they've listened to the entire juz of a Quran in a day. So let's kind of talk about just like, again, we're not diagnosing anyone and saying that we have the solution, but we know that this does impact our mental health, and kind of what should we as just people be encouraging one another, or being able to look out for when it comes to spirituality and mental health?
Just like we said a little bit earlier, it's just so important to have that balance, right? That we're not discouraging anyone from, if they are prescribed medicine, take medicine. If you need talk therapy, whatever it is that you're going to use or utilize and have access to. And I think that's the biggest thing, is access.
Mhm.
Being able to remove the stigma, because there's more access. It's become so costly just to see a therapist, to even get medication. Some people say they have to go to Canada or Mexico to get some medicine for their bipolar. Like or you have to go on discounted websites, right? All those things. And so we definitely have to remove the stigma within our community, just by making sure that the help that's needed is accessible, right? And I think that's just key. And then in addition to that, those who are our spiritual care providers, that they do have certification in counseling, right? And so and it's a blessing, particularly here in Atlanta. We do have imams who are certified in counseling, right? And they can provide that type of spiritual and pastoral care, because you want someone who is qualified when you're grieving as a widow, when you are facing a terminal illness, or you're experiencing suicidal thoughts. And those are real situations that happen often, and especially within the African American community, and within the Muslim community, both. So I think it's just important that we speak to the heart of it. Like, what is the undercurrent? What are the undergirds that is creating these environments for our families to have sicknesses? And some things are genetic, yes, and then some things are just environmental stress. And we know as a people, we're not immune from it. And so what health measures can we put in place to alleviate a lot of those things? So when we do have widows, when we do have single parents, what measures are being put in place as a support to alleviate the mental stress? Because I mean, we talked about it earlier, like spirituality and religion, you need a support network. You need like this right here is a support group, right? Like, you have one another, and you're creating a space for other people to be able to say, I can plug into this, or I can get information from here in order to help me in this path. And so when you have a support group, when you have I can go to the widows support group, I can go to the grief counseling. All these things are imperative in order for us to survive. Too many of us are doing it alone, trying to go it alone, trying to survive. And the things that are coming at us on a daily basis, you cannot face alone. It's too much. And so the combination of spiritual support, that medical aspect of it, as well as the spiritual aspect, that they're both needed. They both cannot be neglected, and we need more of it. So it's really just having more resources, right? And then from the Islamic perspective, what is it that we can do to kind of root out a lot of those spiritual diseases, right? Because when we see that, you'll find families that have a history of sickness, right? And then you may come to find out there was something else going on in that home. It could be some incest. It could have been rape. It could have been all kinds of things that were never addressed, and then it was perpetuated upon the children, right? And so it's just important that when we do look at the bigger picture, we look at it holistically, so that we can say, yeah, go ahead and pray, but how can I pray when I know this person has violated me? I can't stand behind them in prayer, right? So it's hard to be able to express yourself spiritually when that same person can be your oppressor or your violator. I know that was another direction, but It's true. It's true. It's just,
Yeah. And as I was listening to you, I think too, the conversation a lot of times, not just this conversation, I'm just saying in general when we're talking in conversation, is that I like to tend to approach it also from a preventative standpoint, right? And you kind of think about it in the physical realm, right? When you got some type of physical ailment, some people wait until they got a physical ailment, till the doctor told them they need to lose weight, till they get all these health problems before they start paying attention to their physical health, right? And then they start paying attention to it. Then they want to correct it or whatever. But when you think about, and you mentioned holistic, you're thinking about your physical body, you're thinking about your mental, and you're thinking about your spiritual. And from a preventative standpoint, you have to implement preventative practices in all these aspects of your body, right? Whether you're talking about your body, whether you're talking about your mental health, you have to have certain practices so that you don't necessarily come across these crises. Or when you do come across these crises, you've already developed certain practices to be able to handle them, right? And I think the same thing I approach, and I think a lot of people will try to approach spirituality the same way. It's an aspect of your life, and you can tell me if I'm wrong because I'm not a spiritual expert, right? I just try to be, on development. But when you approach spirituality, I try to approach spirituality from the same way. I know it's a part of my being, so let me nurture it, right? Let me try to institute different practices to nurture it so that I don't fall into that lack, right? So my question is, I guess, is that what do you think are some of the practices that people can maybe implement in their life, right? Some of them are already prescribed if we're talking about Muslims, right? But just so from a preventative standpoint, to keep our spirituality healthy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, makes clear sense. And I think, you're right on it. And oftentimes we say, I'm not a spiritual expert. That's so that when you are, right? And I think it's just important what you named as the preventative measures, being proactive, right? Like you don't wait till you have heart disease to say, oh, let me eat healthy, right? And so when we talk about the heart, that is our main organ that is pumping that blood through our veins, throughout our body, oxygenating all of our cells, making sure that we're replenishing and everything is circulating the way it should be, right? And that's the organ that never stops. When we sleep, it's still going, inshallah, God willing. And so the same thing, we have to think about our spiritual heart. And they've actually recently, discovered that there are neurotransmitters within the heart, right? So there's a spiritual intellect that exists there, in that where they thought the brain was sending messages to the heart, it was actually vice versa, right? The heart is sending messages to the brain. And so that means that is the organ, both physically and spiritually, that we have to nurture. So how do we feed the heart? What does the heart need as spiritual food, as nourishment, right? And so we think about those things that may cause diseases like jealousy or envy or, we can go down the list, right, of all those things that, we get angry, we get quick to have a temper. So you think about those things that are a healing for it or a cure for it, being patient, being kind, being merciful, being humble. All of those things are spiritual practices that are, while they may not be tangible, you can't touch humility, right? You can practice humility, right? And while you may be quick to say something, rather than being arrogant or excessive in that moment, I'm going to remove myself, or I'm going to keep my words to myself, or I'm just not even going to have those thoughts because they're not going to benefit me, right? And so the same way how we may physically fast from food and restrain from food and drink during Ramadan and intimacy with our spouses, is this the same thing? You're feeding your spirit with the word of God. remembrance of God. That's why, when you see those people go into the caves and the mountains and the monasteries, they're retreating from the noise, right? So people going on hikes, being in nature, those are practices to get us back to who we are as human beings, so that when we connect with other human beings, we can connect with them humanely, right? And I think about, I remember a long time ago, my spiritual teacher, Imam Wardi Muhammad, he said that being Muslim was equivalent to being human, right? And so I think I was in third grade. I started putting human on all of my applications, on my forms, anything they asked me, like race or ethnicity, or, I just put, I'm a human being. And to this day, if you go on my Instagram, human being, Facebook, human being, because I think about how much we are being inhumane with one another, right? So if we talk about spiritual practices, we look at different religions and the principles that they're grounded in. It's how can we be more human and humane with one another, right? And that's something that we do have to constantly assess ourselves, hold ourselves accountable, and check and evaluate. And that was, one of the things that the companions of the prophet and those righteous predecessors, those who lived before us, they would see how much can they account for themselves in one day. Like at the end of the day, imagine evaluating yourself every day, my thoughts, my words, my interactions, what I took in, what did I eat today? What did my heart eat? So if we think about what are we really feeding our heart, it will really shift and change how we move in the world, how we move with others. And I thought it was really beautiful the other day. I was in a classroom and the teacher told the children, what are you feeding your heart? Like when you hear the recital of the Quran, that is a meal being served to you. So how do you act when you're sitting at the table, right? Do you just sit any kind of way? Do you just eat any kind of way? No, you sit upright, right? You have your food in front of you. You're eating over your plate. And so all of them shifted their position and their posture and just their attention to the words and the recital of the Quran, because it's like, okay, I'm feeding my heart, right? And so whether, you're Muslim or you're non-Muslim, what are you doing to feed your heart? It is those things that are going to elevate you in a very human way. I know I went around the.
No. You were right on it. And I just wanted to, because when you think about it, I just feel like we need to, I don't know, this is just my personal thing, but I just feel like we need to be more vigilant, right? And I say vigilant in terms of us fueling our spirituality in a positive manner. And I'm saying that because in this day and age, we are bombarded with a lot of negativity, whether you're talking about every time you sign on to social media. So I'm like, and of course, we don't necessarily view the devil as, like some type of, negative human being. It's more like the influence. But what I'm saying is that these negative influence, they have a very good negative campaign going on, right? I mean, like they are very strong. The negativity is very strong. So we have to be as vigilant about us arming our spiritual life, us fueling our spiritual life as continuously, I mean, I don't mean to be in a constant state of prayer, but I mean, like we don't need to be lackadaisical about how we fuel our spirituality, just like we don't need to be lackadaisical about when it comes to the mental, because there are forces out there to have a different agenda to take us in a negative direction, and they're pulling out all the stops on their agenda. So we need to pull out on all the stops when it comes to our spirituality and how we protect that, how we fuel that, and how we feed into that based upon our interactions, with others. And I don't mean it in the sense of, us always going around talking about religion, or I'm just talking about our daily practices on us building ourselves up, spiritually. I mean, you touched on some bases, and I think that this is why we have prayer, and this is why we pray 5 times a day, kind of to always bring us back 5 times a day, we coming back to that and we fueling
Mhm.
that. But also too, even if it's in the things that you read, you know what I mean? Even if it's in the things that you watch on TV, all this kind of stuff affects your spirit, right? So we need to have a practice
Right.
of it. And just like you mentioned, how the prophet and companions would sit about doing accountability of different things. We need to do that like on a continual basis. I
Right.
mean, I
And
just feel like it helps
mhm.
people kind of leave that to the wayside and don't really think about it until you have a crisis, until you have a death, until there's something that bring you back to the only thing you got is the one God. You know what I mean? I don't know. Maybe
Yeah.
I'm rambling, but
No, actually,
I, I, I
Nafisa.
I just feel I just feel very strong about that.
Mhm. Nafisa, as you were speaking, actually it made me think about like how I like to do things is, when you first wake up and when you talk about all the worldly things and the social media and the things you watch on TV, I know oftentimes, and I'm talking about after the sun comes up. Of course, you have more quiet time before that when you think about before Fajr and after Fajr. But, I like to listen to like a morning inspiration or hear something that's, going to kind of uplift me, help me get through that day. So, listening to things that are good for you, that's another way of feeding your soul, so to speak. Like you're feeding your heart, feeding your soul. So and then other things you can do, or thinking about things that you like to do, whether it's that one. I know one of you guys mentioned like hiking earlier, I think Shahida, but different outdoor activities or things that's going to kind of lift you, and lift your spirits and make you happy with whatever it is, and try to keep those practices in your life on like a regular basis. um, so inspiration from where it might be. Of course we like to start that, of course, with Allah's word. So Quran, scripture, whatever faith that you are, read the book, and then get something from that. And then sometimes it may be a speech, a khutbah, a sermon, something that may help you, like, even if you just get a little bit of something on a day-to-day basis. I think that that's something that kind of helps to ground you. And then just having that quiet time, whether you do that in the morning or at night. It's like going to the mountaintop. We all kind of need that time a little bit. And I think that that's definitely healing in itself, just to have that quiet time to listen to what your inner being is saying. As Shahida mentioned, just being human. That's part of something that we really need to have.
Yeah. And before we leave tonight, I really wanted to talk about eight traits of a spiritually mature woman, and it's kind of going over these really, really, really quickly. So, actually, there are more characteristics than this, but these are the eight that I found that I really wanted us to kind of touch over, and I mean touch over as in 1 minute if we can. So, number one, when we talk about spiritually mature women, the woman is at rest, and it's really talking about, how busy are we?
Mhm.
Are you too busy that you can't be at rest? Are you a fanatic? You're just hustling all over the place, but you can be at rest even if you are busy, right? Because we know that we have busy lives and things like that. So just kind of thinking about number one, she is at rest. And so thinking in the back of your mind, what does that rest look like for you spiritually as a spiritually mature woman? What does that rest look like? Anybody want to comment on that, or we can keep on moving?
We keep rolling.
Okay.
We didn't
Number
get
two.
stopped.
Okay. Number two. She is bold in her convictions. I think that this is important because, we're in a time where, of course, we have social media and pressures of people thinking and feeling specific ways. And we have to, as it says in the Quran, fear not the criticism of the criticizers, but being convicted in the not just the philosophies of the world, but really the theology and ideology of the Quran and the Sunnah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and how all of these things build into us being more bold in our convictions. Like, you know what, standing up for justice, even if it's against your own self. Being able to do that. You know what? Yeah, this is just, and it's going against me as a person, but I know that this is the right thing to do. So let me just lean into that. So being bold in her convictions is also important. Anybody else want to carry on to the next one?
Sure. So she is submitted. You know, a lot of times when we think about submission, you know, sometimes that kind of, you know, people kind of look at that as a, you know, it's just like a hard thing to do. Because a lot of times we hear that more so, you know, we don't just hear about submission between, you know, for us and our Lord, but submission, you know, if you're married, submitting to your husband, to a certain extent, you know, husbands to their wives. And a lot of times we look at submission as being a form of weakness, and when in all actuality, it's really a form of strength. You know, just being able to know when to be able to pull back, or, you know, when you need to be on the front line with certain things. So submission is like I think it's something that's taking in and handled with a certain level of maturity that's needed for that.
And I do want to make a comment, just to go back a second, when we talk about being bold in her convictions, that I think this also really shows up in how she lives her life, right? It's not when I say that, I mean, not just about being bold and what says that she's about or what she's about, but like in how you live your life is bold, you know, and in the actions that you take, the fortitude that you have, the perseverance, the patience, all of that is bold, and it shows up in how you live your life. So I wanted to say that. And then on the submitted part, this is something I learned, right? This is something that I learned because I used to always twinge when I heard submission. I used to have this twitch. Just because, you know, we as Black women, when you a Black woman, you raised by, you know, Black women all the time, you know, it's this we get this strength in this all this testosterone. And so this idea that we've been fed about submitting is being less than, right? You know, I need to shrink in who I am and go in the background unless this is the idea that we've been fed. So but I think a mature woman understands that submitting is really, this whole concept of submitting is bigger than that, right? It's really bigger than that. It's really just an acknowledgement of what the moment requires, right? A lot of times the moment requires patience. The moment requires silence. The moment just requires stillness, right? In whatever you're dealing with, right? Requires stillness. And then sometimes it requires just silent action or silent retreat or silent stillness. So I think as Black women, this is something that we have to, but a mature woman has to come in to understand it. It's a much bigger concept than the propaganda has really fed us to be, right? And a mature woman understands that and doesn't twitch when she hears that word, right?
You know, and to that point, it's really good that you said that, in that you have to be anchored, you know, spiritually and mature to be able to live into that, right? Because that nefs, or that lower self, is what's responding to that, right? But when it's seated, when you're seated in your soul, I submit to all that is good, right? And what is it that's good for me? That's what, you know, I can move in that freely and gracefully. Yeah, with dignity. I think that's the most powerful thing. And like you said, we need better PR to be able to, you know, be bold in that good work. So
And which next leads me to, through submission, women, you know, spiritually mature woman needs to exude gentleness. And I think this is also a concept that sometimes we as African American women kind of um, don't we know that we can portray this, but what is seen on TV is that we don't portray this, but we do. that we are, gentle when we say something, or that we can be gentle in how we speak to others. It's always that they portray us in a way where we've reached our peak, right? When they say, oh, Black women don't know how to be gentle. But I think that, again, this is just a misunderstanding, or an old untold truth about in general how Black women can actually be. But when you see a Black woman, and especially, you see your grandmother, you introduce your friend to your, hey grandma, this is so and so and so, immediately she draws you in with her gentleness. Hey baby, right? Going in there and get a plate, right? All of those things, right? We have those characteristics. And just remembering that gentleness is something that all women can exhibit, but of course, it begins in the heart. So, thinking about how gentleness subsides all of these negative qualities also that are in the environment, and how we need to basically exude this gentleness in order to be spiritually mature as well. And next, we want to go into a mature, spiritually mature woman is humble. Humility is becoming a lost art. We know that, and it comes without demand. But humility really is not even cowardice, right? So, in humility, we see that we need kind of a sense of, through humility there is a sense of submission, and through humility there's also a sense of gentleness. These are also some things when you think about a woman who is spiritually mature. She is humble. She's not boastful, she's not bragging, she's not arrogant. And we see the sense of humility kind of, when a woman is humble, it's kind of like, society and social media has us always saying, hey, talk about your wins, talk about, all the good things you have going on, talk about, talk. But not everything needs to be on the world stage. There are some things that require just taking a seat back. And that really takes a lot of spiritual maturity to understand that, again, spirituality is being able to understand oneself, being able to know your own power inside of yourself. And when you know and understand that, you don't necessarily have to be boastful about every single thing that you say and do. So something else, that's something else that a spiritually mature woman needs to be. Nephew wanted to say something.
Oh no, not on that. I think you
Okay.
wrapped that one up.
Okay.
So
Okay. The
so
next
we'll
one.
move on. Which actually kind of goes into the next one, which
Mhm.
is being scripture saturated with scripture. So no matter what walk of faith you are, like, kind of what I spoke on earlier, just getting a taste of it on a daily basis in the morning, and using this as your guide to be able to maneuver, using it as your GPS, any and everything that you're going to need, or you have question about, or you need guidance on, is going to be right there. And so a lot of times how we function and what we do is based on the knowledge that we have. And so if you ground yourself, with knowledge and understanding, you're able to, help yourself as well as other people to be able to do that. Just bringing more comfort to your world, and being able to help other people. So just getting, well versed in through Quran, and not picking it up every day, and not just through Ramadan. I'm mentioning Ramadan is coming again. Of course, we, try to get that whole thing in. Maybe some people maybe once or twice, but really digging into not just even just reading it, but understanding what it means. What exactly is this saying, and how can I apply it to my life, and how can I help other people? So it's very important. Just be saturated with that. Okay, so we'll go on to the next one. She is justice and mercy oriented. Mm. Justice and mercy oriented. Shahid, I think I want to give you this one to comment on this one. But I really, when you think about what we just talked about, gentleness and being humble, being mercy, a lot of the these are attributes of Allah. and we have that within our own selves, but, of course, Allah's most merciful. And so just speak on that a little bit.
Yes. So, I think it's something that we have intuitively, right? It's in our nature. Even as just when we're dealing with children, right? We want to be fair, we want to be just, and we're just merciful as that is the womb nature, right? The nature of the womb is to have mercy and empathy and compassion and to nurture, others, right? Of course, we're going to make sure we're just and fair and exact justice as well. But it's always done with a merciful hand. And, when we find ourselves being unjust or unmerciful or vindictive, and, there's something else under that, right? But we're naturally inclined to do that. And we find it happens most, it just starts at home, within our families where we're trying to uh, be the mediator, right? And you find yourself always in that position, right? Trying to mediate between family members or siblings or even the children, right? So I think it's just good to see how can we channel that into our sister relationships, right? Our work relationships, and extend it out to wherever we work in the community. I think it's just needed because it's missing. That's why so many people are advocating and social justice activists
Right.
because not enough people are experiencing it. So yes.
Yeah. And I think the last one that we have here is that a spiritually mature woman is dependent, right? And I would go maybe even a little bit further and say interdependent, right? And then even maybe a little further and say that she is a leader, a great leader, and a great follower, right? A great leader and a great follower. And I think that speaks to the whole interdependence of, yes, she can forge out here if she needs to make a way when there's no way or there appears to be no way, right? She can stand alone on principle and purpose if she needs to, but she also recognizes that we all need each other, right? And the importance of community, right? So she's a leader in the sense that she can do that. And she's a great follower in the sense that she understands the principles upon which she is rooted in, right? And she's a great follower of whatever those principles are that she has taken on for herself, right? And so that's kind of like I see that that whole thing of being spiritually mature, that you recognize that you're both, not necessarily at the same time, but you're both, and you live in interdependent. You strive for that type of balance in life.
Did you want to say something, Shahida, before we're about to wrap this all the way up, uncovering the spirituality of the crown?
Yes, no, I know prayer is in. So I just really wanted to say I thank you all for the conversation. It's much needed. And as Sister Nafisa was saying, a good leader knows how to follow, right? And oftentimes we think we have to be out in the front, but leadership can happen in the rear, right? So, it's just all about perspective and understanding when you're deeply rooted and connected and anchored with a spiritual connection to God and given those religious parameters and guidance, that a lot of what have we been given in our society as the depiction of a spiritual woman or the only way that can look, we've limited ourselves. And so looking at that plural way that it can be expressed, we don't have to be reactionary, be just in contention with the natural list that you were given of ways that we can express that spiritual maturity. And because it's been given to us in such a negative way, it's like really like taking a deeper look, like she said, you know, like sitting with it, right? Being still with it and being present to where's my power in this? What is God really communicating to me? So I just wanted to thank you all for this evening. Thank you so much.
Alhamdulillah. And so, as we know, it is time for prayer here in Atlanta, Georgia. So we do want to go ahead and close out, but we want to remind everybody to like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to us on YouTube. And next week, we will be discussing, I said this last week, but really, I mean this week for real now, we will be discussing You Can Be the Happiest Woman in the World. And again, this book is really talking about scriptures from the Quran and how women can really take those scriptures and live into them. So if you want to share in that experience with us next week, make sure you get the book, number one, Amazon or wherever an Islamic bookstore is, and join us next week. This will also be the first book of our book club that we will be discussing. So again, You Can Be the Happiest Woman in the World. We will be doing that next week. And again, we hope to see you all soon, Crown Nation. And as we going out, peace out. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Assalamu alaikum. See you next week.
Assalamu alaikum.